So hi everyone, happy 2024. I think that a lot of people have moved into 2024 with some exuberance and committed to this being, a good year. It's not to say that there aren't going to be challenges. There's challenges that always come our way, but this is going to be the year where we can equip ourselves so much better so that we can face the challenges, learn and grow. And this is a lot of the reason why we're doing this series is that people can learn some really life-changing skill sets that really help us to face the challenges and not fear the challenges. See the challenges as this is happening for me, not to me. So trying to shift away from that victim mentality of like, why is this always happening to me? Why are things always going wrong? To going, wow, I'm really grateful for these challenges, for some of the adversity that I might have to face this year, and how do I glean out the lessons so that I can continue to learn and grow and move forward, so that we don't, go into our day and into our weeks and our months and even a year with a spirit of fear and trepidation. So that like kind of leads me quite nicely into what the theme is of today, and we're going to be looking at emotions. So as a result of our last two sessions, and if you look on the WhatsApp group Becoming Giant, there are links to listen, and you can listen and re-listen if you want to on the how we've been talking about the reptilian part of our brain, that fight or flight response, kind of getting an introduction to our reptilian part of our brain, and just sort of understanding more of our animal side. It's so important that we are human, and we've got a prefrontal cortex that separates us from the rest of the animal species on planet Earth, which is why we're so evolutionary. We are such evolutionary creatures. But we also must never forget that we also are two parts animal. And we spoke about the reptilian part of our brain and our mammal part of our brain. So today we're going to be looking more at what is the mammalian side of us. One of the challenges that we have as being human is for us to use our prefrontal cortex, our sense of reason, our consciousness, our ability to think cognitively, to almost, we want to surpass and elevate ourselves from being animalistic, okay? So if we were to sort of look at maybe like riots, for instance, where people are just going and smashing up things and being super, super destructive, a lot of that is that we're tailoring ourselves, or we're giving ourselves into that kind of animal sort of instinct. So it has its place, it's there. The part of us being human and civilized, if you want, is that we elevate ourselves, and how do we use our animal side to help us to move forward in a way that is going to be not just for the highest good of myself, but also for the highest good of the people around me, and ultimately to give me meaning and purpose and to live a more fulfilling life. And that's the gift that we've been given, but it's a challenge. And we're very often there's a pulling and a conflict that happens inside of us, because part of our animal wants to come out and just sort of take over. And part of self-control is how we manage that, so that we can start to respond to our world rather than react to our world. And when we spoke about the reptilian, it's very reactive. It's there to keep us alive, obviously, because we need to survive. We need to thrive as a species. Mother Nature demands that we do. But like, how do we then practice becoming more responsive and practice being a lot more mindful? So this information about understanding our reptilian more, and then coming into now what we're going to talk about more about the mammalian side of ourselves. And as we sort of go through the ranks in our sessions, we're going to get more and more and more to this more mindfulness way of thinking, behaving, and being, so that we can actually start to empower ourselves in our own creative nature, the kind of life that we want. And that is incredibly unique from one person to the next. So what we have from a mammalian side is that we, obviously, if you look at the animal kingdom, we're mammals. We give birth to live young. They suckle the breast, so it's breast milk. And also they stay close to the mother in order to learn the social skills and learn how to survive as being that species. So if we look in the animal kingdom, if, for instance, a pride of lions, the cubs will stay with the mother for so long. And in that space and in that pride, the young, as they grow up, they will learn how to hunt. They'll learn what to do and what not to do. So if you think as the human species, we do exactly the same thing. The more intelligent the species, the longer they actually stay with the mother, and the longer that they will stay with the group. So obviously we've got like 18 years, we stay as dependents with our parents for 18 years. And so we're being taught the social structures. We're being taught the do's and the don'ts. We're being taught about what is going to hurt us and harm us and ultimately kill us and what won't. So, and the complexities that actually happen within our cognitive nature and within our personality development as human beings, we're extremely complex in terms of that. And it's like kind of figuring that out, learning what your identity is, learning your likes, your dislikes, learning about your dreams and how to move forward and how to problem solve, etc., etc. So all of this is actually done within the social structures. We spoke about your, if you want, like your environment, which ultimately starts off as your parents, like that's your world. Then it kind of moves out to extended family. Then it moves out to your smaller communities, and then your greater community, and then your country, and then sort of globally. And there's huge amounts of influences that are coming, and still to this day, we are highly influenced, and the world is constantly shifting and moving and changing. So how do we actually navigate that, and how do we deal with that? So also what makes us mammalian is, and again, you'll see in the animal kingdom, is, all mammals have a level of emotion. And even when, like, if you look at like your pets, if you're a dog lover or a cat lover, or if you have chickens or ducks or horses or whatever it is, that each animal will have its unique personality. And within that, within that personality, there will be a range. You'll see that the animals have a range of emotions. So as human beings, we have this thing called emotions, and we're going to be talking about these emotions. What are they? Why have we been given them? All we know is that they have this propensity to wreak absolute havoc in our lives. All we know is that we have these feelings that come up that sometimes we don't know why they come up. They're very overwhelming. They can be extremely confusing. And we don't really stop to say, wait a minute, like, what is the purpose of them? Why are they here? And how can I start to navigate them in a way that is going to help me, one, learn a lot more about myself, but two, also learn about my environment. So you might have heard me say in previous sessions, we're in constant relationship with our environment. So I just want you to take a little bit of a moment. Right. So we're all sitting on a chair right now. So I just want you to just take a moment just to feel your relationship with that chair. Where is it pressing on your body? What does it feel like? What does your body feel like? In other words, how's it responding to the chair that you're sitting on? Or maybe you're sitting on your bed, or maybe you're sitting on your couch. What is the experience that you're having just by sitting on the chair? And just allow yourself to focus on what your body is communicating to you. So as I sit here, I'm sitting on a relatively hard chair. I've got a cushion, so the cushion is soft. It feels very comfortable. But on the back, in my lower back, it's like quite a hard plastic chair. I can feel the difference of the sensation of the back of the chair on my lower back versus the chair that I'm sitting on with a cushion. So right now, I'm in relationship with this chair. And it sounds weird to say like relationship, because why? We tend to think, oh, relationship is like, it's just with humans or with a living being. But it's absolutely not true. We can have a relationship right now with a Zoom meeting. We can have a relationship as we're talking with our, with our laptops, with our phones. You can be in relationship with a cup of coffee. So we want to start like practicing a little bit more mindfulness in that space when we start talking about like this relate. In other words, what am I feeling around it? How does it feel when and what does it evoke inside of me when I pick up my cup of coffee and I sip it? And what does it taste like? How am I stimulated in that space? by practicing that, we just start to really get far more of a greater idea of the range of what we feel through our sensations as well as through our emotions and all of the sensations. So we've got 5 senses, and I would also say we've got a 6th sense, especially women. You know, we're quite attuned in that space. But if you want your intuition, 6th sense, and your gut feeling, so we've got 5 senses, and that is through sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. So we're in relationship all the time, and your brain is taking in a huge amount of data through what you're hearing, through what you're seeing, tasting, touching, and the other one. Okay, so we are going to be in a constant space of like ebbing and flowing through emotions that are happening at lightning fast speed. Some we will be more aware of, others we're not going to be so aware of. So when we are children, we experience emotions in very black and white. In fact, it's like four main emotions that a child in their first development will start to experience. It's like happy, sad, mad, glad. Okay, very, very stark. So children are quite extreme. They're either super happy or super sad. You know, like they don't, it's not nuanced. So as we start to grow older, as we start to experience the world, we'll start to experience and see that like there's a whole range of emotions happening between the two extremes. So I can be happy and mad, but in between here, I can feel annoyed, disappointment, frustration. So what there is there's like a mixture. We can also feel happy and sad at the same time. You know, like I'm so overjoyed with the wonderful news that I got that I start crying. You know, so we can actually have, as we start to get older, we start to see that extremeness starts to come more together, and then we start to move into the more mushy sort of gray area of what it means to feel emotion. So we can even have something like anxiety, for instance. So we spoke about reptile. Obviously, if reptile is overactive, we can go into that real fight or flight, terrified, I'm going to die kind of space, which then stops us dead in our tracks. But we can still feel a rush of nervousness before you do a motivational talk, before you do a presentation, or a rush of nervousness wondering, sure, like I've got to make enough money to make my rents. But there can actually also be a level of like motivation and excitement in that space to kind of get you moving. So in other words, it's entirely possible to have anxiety and excitement to mix in together that is actually going to move us in the direction that we need to be moved. So if we look at the thing called emotion, the E is energy in motion. It's energy in motion. So if we didn't have emotions, if we flatlined, in other words, if we were it's called apathy, like me. I just really don't care, like one way or another. I don't feel happy. I don't feel sad. We would not be motivated to do anything. So our emotions are motivating forces, but it's how we decode our emotions and what is the message that the emotion is telling us about our environment, as well as externally, as well as our internal environment. And this is what makes us so complex. Because we've got these two worlds that are sort of happening simultaneously. We've got this internal world. So right now, each and every one of us, we can agree we're all sitting in the privacy of our own home and we're having a conversation. Well, okay, I'm the one that's talking, but like we were having a conversation earlier, you guys are listening to this talk. You know, we can all agree that we're kind of having this experience right now together. But there is also another reality that's happening in each and every one of us. That's a private reality, because now your internal world is responding to your life in general of what's been happening around you over the last couple of weeks, maybe this morning, over the thought of the future. So there's a whole different world that is going to be happening very, very differently. So, and you will be experiencing in any one moment, maybe I say something, it might trigger up something for you. It could be something negative. It could be something really positive. It could start evoking some hope and excitement inside of you. So this is all happening sort of in your internal world, but nonetheless, you're going to be experiencing a range of emotions. So we need to learn to know and almost discern between am I responding to an external threat or an external communication? or am I responding to an internal communication, an internal memory, an internal belief system, an internal thought that might be coming up, an internal memory that might be coming up? So it's about us being able to discern between, like, what is my external world telling me and what is my internal world telling me. So this is where we can actually get quite complex, and it takes some time and practice for us to be able to navigate and to be able to just almost sit within ourselves to actually look at an emotion and say, what is the message? Because an emotion is a messenger. Emotions are like what I would call psychological nerve endings. So on a biological level, we have our central nervous system, and it's there's nerves that shoot out onto our skin and into our body, and through those nerves we are able to explore our world through our touch. And that central nervous system is also there to protect us. In other words, what it's saying is that if you are hurt, I'm going to cause you a lot of pain, because that pain is going to tell you to adjust. So what I say is that if you were to put your hand on a hot plate, you would experience excruciating pain on your hand. And as a result of that pain, you would move your hand away very quickly so as not to get too much damage on your hand. Because if you were to keep your hand on the hot plate, what would happen is that you got burnt enough, you would more than likely lose the use of your hand. So now if we go back to the animal kingdom, remember we're two-part animal, now we go back into nature, I need both of my hands to be the fittest. If I only have one hand, I'm all of a sudden, I go down the ranking of the fittest. I'm no longer the strongest. I'm no longer sort of like up there. So Mother Nature said it's the survival of the fittest. So your central nervous system is to ensure that you remain as fit as possible for as long as possible. That's Mother Nature. We're obviously human beings. We've separated ourselves from it, but just because we have does not mean that those mechanisms aren't in play, and that's why they're there. So what we do is we put our hand on the hot plate, we take off. Not only that, the brain then remembers, don't touch the hot plates, it will burn you. And if it burns you, it could damage you. And if it damages you, you might drop down from being the fittest in Mother Nature. So that's absolutely wonderful. It also then teaches us and allows us and gives us information where we can feel certain pain in our body. If there's a problem, we can go seek help, because maybe if we didn't feel it, it could actually cost us our lives. There are people that do suffer from a rare condition. I don't know what it's called, but they don't have the ability to feel pain. And actually life for them is really, really, really difficult, because they don't know if they break the bone, or if they cut themselves, if they bleed out. They would never know that they had internal injury, because the body does not let them know where there could possibly be damage. So they actually have to live a very, very, very careful, very cocooned life. You would think, oh, wouldn't that be great not to feel pain? Actually, it's not, because there's nothing in the brain to tell them that there is a problem and that they're possibly in danger and that they need to adjust. So they just keep their hand on the hot plate. So again, the emotions are like that, but they're psychological. So when you feel pain physically and when you feel psychological pain, in other words, emotional pain, it actually lights up in the same part of the brain. In other words, the brain doesn't know the difference between whether it's physical pain or whether it's emotional pain. Very sadly, as a society, we don't recognize emotional pain as we would recognize physical pain. So in other words, like, and it's so sad that this, we work for companies, and a loved one dies, you get like, I don't know how, I'm sure it's different from company to company, but to say, you get 5 days off bereavement leave. And then you've got to kind of come back. The expectation is you've got to come back into work and you've got to operate at optimum. But there is a massive hemorrhaging on an emotional level that's happening internally. But now, like if you had to be in a car accident, for instance, and there was massive physical hemorrhaging that was happening inside your body, nobody would expect you to come back to work within 5 days and start operating at optimum. They just simply wouldn't. They really, really wouldn't. All right. There would be a rehabilitation. There would be like, they would work kind of with you in terms of your physical ability. And I think that we're starting to move more and more into that space. I know mental health is something that's become, like more and more real. I mean, there were the days that, you're depressed, so that doesn't even exist, that people are actually starting to become, and like I know that like companies are being a lot more sensitive to these things and allowing for people to get the help that they need, etc. And it's wonderful to see. But regardless, the overall sort of message that we get is that if you are bruised emotionally, if you're injured emotionally, we're not allowed to show that. And we don't give ourselves the time that we need and the space that we need and the support that we need in order to heal ourselves more correctly. So if you had like a major cut, you'd be putting cream on it and you'd be tending to it and ensuring that you support the body to heal it so that there is no infection. When we are not healing emotionally, what essentially starts to happen is there's like a wound, if you want, and that can possibly get infected and it can become something that ends up making us really sick on an emotional, mental, as well as a spiritual level. Talk about like that soul sickness. There's it's so deep. It's so deep inside of us, and it kind of we carry it with us on that kind of level. So by coming into relationship and more conscious relationship with our emotions, it's so important. So we've been conditioned to believe that there's positive emotions and negative emotions. We've been conditioned to believe that we're not allowed to express negative emotions. So the child is having a tantrum, go to your room. Only come out when you've got a happy face on. Okay. We're chastised. We're named and shamed for having negative emotions. So what happens is on deep subconscious level, what we start to do is we start to pack those negative emotions away. That kind of thing of like, hey, Gail, how you doing? Yeah, I'm fine. We mask. But actually, I'm not fine. But there's something inside of me that goes, well, I don't want to tell you that I'm not fine because, you might be uncomfortable with it and, you don't really want to hear my stuff. So as human beings, because we have actually been taught that negative emotions are not desirable and that they are bad, we also don't learn how to deal with other people's negative emotions. We don't like it. We don't know what to do with it. It's like, oh, I don't know how to whoa, okay. Like we tend to, what we want to do is we want to do like we want to positively bypass. So a very typical thing is somebody maybe loses their cats, for instance, and dies and had to put them down. So people will just be like, oh, but he's in a better place now, or you're devastated and it's like, oh, but he's in a better place, and oh, you gave him such a good life, and people kind of want to make you feel better really quickly because like, oh, she's hurting and she's and she's suffering right now. Just all I want to do is I want to make her feel better. But the reality is what's happening is in that space we're going, I don't know what to do with this emotion. I don't know what's going on with this emotion, and I want to get through it and get past it as quickly as possible. So in that moment, like I'm really crying and I'm feeling like this terrible loss over my beautiful cat that's just died, and people are going bypassing that, and it has this sort of knock-on effect that like I'm not feeling I don't feel validated in that space. So we get into that cycle of going, I shouldn't be feeling this. I should actually be getting over this quickly. I should be stronger. I should be more mature around this. So what we do is we then start to dissociate and we start to pack that grief away. But here's the thing is the emotion doesn't go away unless we learn to process it and express it in a way that it needs to be expressed. And the reason being is that the emotion is bringing us a message. They're little messengers. So emotions in and of themselves are not good or bad. They're extremely neutral. They have a function, and each one will have a function. So my 10 fingers, neither one is good or bad. They just all have a function. My hand, neither one is good or bad. It just has a function. So my body parts. So emotions are very much the same thing. They simply have a function. And so the function is, hey, I've got a message for you. Hey, I want to tell you something about your environment. I want to tell you something about what's happening inside of you. I want to show you the areas that you haven't dealt with, that you need to express. I want to tell you that I want you to feel, I want you to validate yourself. I want to tell you, I want you to be more caring of yourself, loving or compassionate to yourself. So I like to sort of see our emotions a little bit like people. You almost got to give them like little characters. I see them as like these little Oompa Loompas, like so to speak. I also see that like our positive emotions are kind of like we had to get in the typical American high school kind of Hollywood sort of vibe that we all grew up on watching American movies. Is the positive emotions are like the jocks and the cheerleaders. Everybody celebrates those. Nobody suppresses negative emotions. I'm super excited. I won't suppress that. I'll share it with the world. I'll be like, woo, like it's wonderful. And I embrace it and I celebrate that part of me. The negative emotions are kind of like the misfits of the school, the weird ones, the unpopular people. Those ones, those emotions are like you're not welcome here, you don't belong here, you're kind of bad. Okay. So even if like we look at like some of the America's quite a good example of that, they seem to have this real problem about these terrible tragedies that happen with schools where there are these misfitted kids that come into the school and with guns and all the rest of it. It's kind of like there's a pressure cooker, the rejection. Something starts to go faulty and something sort of snaps, which actually then there becomes like a catalyst in that space. And our positive emotions are very much like that. They start to like, there's a build up and a build up and a build up and a build up and a build up. But here's the thing, and like again, I like to visualize it like if I take my negative emotions, no, I'm not going to listen to them. And I open a door and I kind of slam them in and I close the door. Okay. And all my negative emotion is like, hey, dude, like I've just got a message for you. I'm just here like to tell you something. And I don't want to hear you. I don't want to hear you. And I slam it in and I close the door. All right. The problem here is that if I have a similar emotion that comes up in the future, all right, say for instance, rejection that I have ignored since childhood. When I open the door to slam this feeling of rejection, because I'm feeling this rejection, I get all the other feelings of rejection all coming at me all at the same time. So I don't ever, so it's like a tidal wave. It starts to snowball. So you get one feeling of rejection and it builds and builds and builds. So when I open the door quickly to kind of push my emotion away, my feeling of rejection away, it's almost like that. You see those scenes where people like are stuffing things in their cupboard and then they open and the whole cupboard comes and falls down on you. It's a little bit like that. So what actually ends up happening is that when I start to feel rejection because maybe I got overlooked for a job, okay, and I'm feeling rejected, I don't just feel rejection for being overlooked for the job. I feel a lifetime of unresolved rejection coming at me. So then that feeling of I didn't get the job is almost devastating. And it's not appropriate to the situation. So this is what happens to us is when we start to reject these negative emotions, when we start to push them away. So we want to actually start to develop more of an intentional relationship and invite those feelings in to come and have a chat with us. So we talk about like them being little children, for instance. So if we look at it like, anger, for instance, and I use anger because I think anger is something that we all suffer from in one way or another. And it can be more passive aggressive or it can be very overt. I know for myself, I used to suffer from like huge anger issues, and that was from severely repressed anger from childhood. So every single time I got angry about something, I got the tidal wave, and it was so disproportionate to the actual experience that I was happening that it was almost like left field. Like people would be like, what actually happened? And by going into therapy and like processing the past anger, it of course naturally then what happened is the anger got less and less and less and less intensified. So like let's just say like with anger, actually a better one actually is fear. So because obviously we all have fear, we all are afraid, and it comes through with our anxiety. So fear, for instance, is something that we can start to invite in because we're afraid. So I like to help my clients I go, there was one particular client who was experiencing an enormous amount of anxiety. And I said, I want you to run a bath and put some candles on and put some bubble bath. And if you like wine, go grab yourself a glass of wine, like a place where you feel safe and secure. And I said, I just want you to like close your eyes. And I want you to like kind of bring up this emotion of fear. And I want you to ask it to come join you and invite it in and ask it to come sit with you and ask it to give you the message that it needs to give you. And she was kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird. And I said, just do it and see what comes up for you. See what the message is. When I saw her again, she said it was so transformative because she realized that the emotion of fear wasn't there to hurt her. She realized that the emotion of fear was giving her more insight to the things that she was afraid of. But also what it did is it allowed her to speak to the emotion of fear from a place of maturity, from the adult self, if you want to, from more of a reasoning, cognitive experience. And like going, so like fear could be like, I'm so afraid of the future because I think that we're not going to be successful, for instance. So it gives you an opportunity to start to like have a conversation with that emotion and that to talk to that emotion in a way of going, it's understandable that we're afraid of the future, but we don't know what the future holds. But like, what do we know about ourselves right now? Like we're capable. We know our stuff. We know that we're experts in our field, that we have the ability to be able to get up in the morning and start another day. That things like we can say to ourselves, like we take it one day at a time and we trust in ourselves and we trust in our capabilities. So it can kind of be like that sort of self-talk. What actually then happens is that emotion then, it's amazing how it happens. It just starts to dissipate. Because what it's done is it's brought us a message. What it's done is we have embraced it and we have had some kind of a connection with it. And once it says, oh, okay, I've given you the message, it then feels now, hey, I don't need to be here anymore. And so what will happen is that overwhelming feeling will start to dissipate. It kind of gets lower and lower and lower and lower. And we can start to see the wood for the trees. The problem is that when we start to suppress, they say what you resist persists. Okay, it's that cupboard of emotions that'll just fall down all over you, and it's extremely overwhelming. So it's about us actually coming into that space of being more braver, I think, being braver to press into the feeling. And like a lot of people are like, how do I press into the feeling? And pressing into the feeling is like having a conversation with your friend over coffee. Let's just say like you're sitting and you're having a cup of coffee. In some ways, what you're doing is you're pressing into each other. In other words, you're listening to each other. So when I'm listening to someone, I'm in their conversation, I'm not kind of like, doing this, unless it's an argument or something like that. And I'm, but if I'm fully engaged into a conversation, I'm pressing in, I'm watching, I'm giving them my eye contact, I'm listening attentively to what they're saying. I'm absorbing their energy. I'm absorbing that moment and the energy and the connection between us. So it's the same sort of thing that we're doing with emotions as we start to press into it and then allow the emotion to come in and press into you as well. And then what we start to see is we go, wow, these emotions aren't actually as scary and as bad and as painful and as damaging as I thought. Because from childhood, we were told they were bad, they were damaging, they were hurtful. So, and remember as a child, we're very black and white, good, bad, happy, sad kind of thing. So it's like, we're extremist in that space. We tend to catastrophize in that space. But as we start to press into this thing called fear, you start to realize, hey, like you're here to protect me. You're here to look after me. You're here to give me messages. Now, it doesn't mean to say that sometimes fear brings a message, more from a preconditioning that says, oh my God, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die. You got to run, you got to run, you got to run. Like as we say, from that more that reptilian kind of like live or die, live or die, live or die kind of thing. But that's okay. You know, if an emotion is coming towards me, like of fear, or even anger, you know, you're going to be, you're under threat and you've got to fight back, and you know, whatever that may be, then I am able to sort of press into that, and then through my cognition and through being adult Gail, I get to be the one that determines the validity of that emotion. Is it really going to? Is it giving me the right message of doomsday? You know, you just even look on the internet and these doomsdayers, these fear mongering kind of people, we're all doomed, or you know, they use very big catastrophizing kind of words, and it's just to evoke fear. It's just to get people anxious and so fearful. And sometimes if I feel so frustrated because a lot of people, they don't know how to interrupt that. They don't know how to sort of stop that. It's another thing where we start to want to guard ourselves around what do we watch, what kind of conversations are we having, what are the words that we're using, you know, what is the type of social media we're listening to, what are the kind of movies that we're listening to, because it can actually start to evoke a lot of fear and get this real spirit of fear. So we find we're having to come into constant connection with you know, with our fear. So we start to want to actually be a little bit more careful and a little bit more cautious in that space. But when we actually get that message, when we start to press into that, not only that, but we start to have a relationship with our variety of fear. So I've got a Gail Whittier fear. That's kind of mine, you know, and it has its own nature, and there will be certain things that trigger it up more so than other things based on my life experience. So each one of you, your fear will manifest in different ways, and the way that you express your fear, the way that you believe around your fear is going to be very unique. So we've got to come like into relationship, no different to you coming into relationship with a business colleague, with your partners, with friendships. It doesn't matter. We want to kind of start figuring it out what it actually looks like. What's its kind of flavor? That happens also now. I'm using fear because we all know what fear is, so it's a frame of reference, but it can be around anxiety as well. Anxiety is just a more of a lesser version of fear, but like, and we can actually start to sort of even drop below fear or below anxiety. And as we get more adept, but we deal with the big boulders, so we start looking at what is my dominant emotion that tends to come up a lot of the time in my life, that gets triggered up the most, the quickest, the easiest, and tends to wreak quite a lot of havoc in my life. So for me, mine was anger. Okay, and then secondly, does anxiety will come up as well. So we stop fearing it and we start learning to work with it. We also start to thank it. We also start to look at the emotion and say thank you for bringing me that message. But then we get to decide the validity of that message, and we get to say, okay, it's not as bad, it's not as catastrophic. All right, and then what we do is we start to reason with that emotion. And then as that happens, all the emotion wants to know is like, did you see me? Did you hear me? Do you understand me? So I can understand the emotion, but it doesn't mean that I have to take on the emotion and allow it to become me and ultimately allow it to determine my next step. So in our sessions before, I think it was the last one that we did, because we were talking about belief systems, okay? We said what we believe determines what we think determines what we feel determines what we choose, and what we choose determines what we do. Okay, so here are like the feelings that we have can actually be so, and by the way, like any one of these can actually happen. We're not binary, it's not like ordered. So if I feel a very, 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 very strong emotion, that can be like the most dominant thing. So for me, anger was very dominant in my life. So I had to like then work around how was I thinking, but ultimately what was I believing? One of the things is that my home environment when I was growing up was very chaotic and extremely unsafe. So it was definitely, my fear was rooted in intense fear. But how I adopted anger was as a way to protect myself, like nature. I needed to look bigger. I needed to look more threatening to keep people as far away from me. Why? Because I saw people as a threat, because that was rooted deeply in my psyche from childhood experiences. I saw people, they hurt you. So therefore, I needed to give off this very rough, tough kind of, you know, persona, if you wanted, so that I could keep people at arm's length. And yet internally, I was desperate for connection. I was desperate to be loved and to be cared for. But anybody who tried to get close to me, I just couldn't cope with it. It was too much of a risk. And so then I would push them away, and that would come through with my anger. So by learning to like then start to see, what am I believing around this situation? What am I believing? What are the statements that I'm saying to myself around any area in your life, but especially like in business? What are the statements that you're saying to yourself around the economy, around tourism, around whatever, the Christmas season, the season's coming up, your work colleagues, the systems that you're using? What are those kind of like bigger, those bigger statements? It's things like, yeah, life is so hard now, trying to earn ends meet. Okay. So that's enough to like evoke fear in me, like everybody's struggling. Okay, so it's like, how do we start to reframe those statements? How do we start to say them in such a way that we can actually start to maybe get a better picture of really what's going on? Because these very big statements that we can make can actually start to feed into the fear that we have. So for me, the statement was, people are dangerous. People cannot come close to me. If they do get close to me, I need to make myself bigger. I need to make myself more threatening to keep them away from me. That was like, that was happening on a very deep subconscious level. But the problem was, it was holding me back in my life. It was messing up my relationships. It was messing up so much in my life and my own self-esteem. There was such a massive knock-on effect. So we start to look at like, what are the big boulders? Start to see, what is my main kind of like emotion that I tend to feel? So it can be fear, it can be anxiety, it can be low self-esteem, it can be self-pity, it can be a deep sadness that we're actually taking around with us. It can be bewilderment, it can be confusion, it can be cynicism even. It can be something like resentment even. We're resentful of the things in our, of the people, places, and things in our life. So we just start to like look at what those are, and we start to identify. Once we can start identifying that, we can start to press into those emotions and start to see that, wow, like these emotions have really got a beautiful message for us, and that we can start to have more of a powerful kind of relationship with this part of us that I think in many ways we reject. We reject that experience. We reject that part of ourselves that has experienced those emotions. As we start to feel those emotions and get more into a better relationship with those emotions, I said earlier about the energy in motion. Okay, so it's like it then starts to push us and move us into different directions, into directions that we choose to go rather than that we've been told to go, or the emotion determines where we're actually going. So as a result of these being messages, they're being our psychological and nerve endings, they're giving us information about our experiences from birth to now, to what we want to experience in the future, because they're there to enhance us, they're there to protect us, they're there to guide us. They are part of our guidance system. And without them, we would not survive. Because if we were apathetic, we wouldn't even be motivated to go searching for food. And I'm talking like even going down, into the other room and opening up the fridge to go and make yourself a sandwich. There would just be absolutely no desire to do anything, which of course is where depression starts to come in. What happens is the range of emotions starts to get depressed and depressed and depressed and depressed and depressed and depressed, until almost like we just sort of flatlining, and like we just don't feel anything. It's almost as if like we're kind of numbing out. And so the more depressed we get and the more we flatline, the less effective we become. So we start to learn, okay, wait a minute, like these emotions are here to protect me. They're here to guide me. They are my friend in terms of the whole range of emotions. How do I start to use the energy of them in a way that is going to be of the betterment of my life? And how of the ones, can I identify the ones that are holding me back because they can't take on a life of their own, and they are determining my outcomes rather than me determining my outcomes, and using them more as a tool rather than actually the be all and the end all, because emotions ultimately are not facts. They are a mere interpretation of our life experiences. And when I say this, I say all of us can sit in a movie house and watch the same movie, and yet each and every single one of us could have a completely different experience. One of you could be crying your eyes out. It was just the most moving thing. The other person could be saying that is just the most rubbish movie I've ever, I mean, like, how did they even get this onto the big screen? Another person could actually, could be cynical about it. The other person could be quite apathetic about it and go, yeah, okay, it was average. But each and every single one of us through that whole experience had different emotions. And so we were interpreting that movie, all right, through our emotions, through our belief systems, through our life experiences, because there could be things in that movie that were triggering, or there could be subject matter that was really boring, or there could be an actor that was really irritating us. So therefore then, whatever we're experiencing in terms of our emotions, is those emotions come up through the interpretation. So they are not fact, and we cannot see them as fact. The moment that you start seeing emotions as facts, then we're allowing our emotions to determine something through perception. And perception is ultimately an illusion. It's an illusion based on life experiences that we would have actually, that we would have come to certain conclusions that are not necessarily based in fact. So we've got to challenge our emotions and kind of go on a fact-finding mission around why are you here? What is your message? Listen to the message, challenge the message, and it'll be phenomenal that you'll start to see how it dissipates. And then we start to realize, wow, these actual emotions are here to protect me, not harm me. They're here to guide me. They're here to give me a message. And how do I use them to better my life going forward? Okay, so this session on emotions, I actually see we're actually doing it in pretty good time. So yeah, I know that we allocate about an hour for this, but we've got through it quite quickly. I hope that this session has given you a good introduction into what it is to be part of our mammalian, is to have emotional feelings, why they are there, and how we can start the process of coming into more of a significant and more meaningful and conscious relationship with our emotions, and a little bit of guidance and on how to start kind of having those conversations. Go and have a bath if you want to just like hang out with anxiety, and go and have a cup of tea with them and just kind of like visualize them. I find it really great to visualize them as like little people, almost like little children if you want. And we just start to have more of a meaningful relationship. But ultimately what we're doing is we're having a far more meaningful relationship with ourselves. And also remember that, like, if you are doing this for yourself, you can actually start to see it in other people. You can actually start to see how other people's emotions are dictating their lives and how they're allowing that to get out of control, or people who have got a lot more emotional maturity. And what happens is when we come into better relationship with our emotion, we start to heighten our emotional intelligence. That starts to level up, because emotionally intelligent people have really great connection with their emotions. They also have the ability to be able to name their emotions, and they can actually start seeing like, oh yeah, like I'm feeling this, and then they can kind of thread through as to the reasons why. Also, what they start to do is they take responsibility for those emotions, and they realize that those emotions are mine. There's a messenger, and it's giving me some really useful information, and they're really responsible with that, and they do something with it. And as a result of that, they're consistently learning and growing. So this gives you like a little bit of insight into how we start the process of becoming more and more and more emotionally intelligent. So I'm going to end there, Gail, on the session of emotions. I'd love to sort of, Gisela, like what, maybe a little bit of feedback if you want to, you don't have to, of maybe what stuck out for you today.
Thank you, Gail. Gisela, over to you.
Thanks very much. Yes, so I think it resonated with me a lot, because this is exactly what I'm going through at the moment. I'm like inundated with bookings. Like I don't even know how to handle everything. It's extremely stressful and overwhelming. And I actually had 2 panic attacks also in the last 2 weeks, because I couldn't cope with it anymore. But I understand that yeah, I need to find coping mechanisms and understand it, and find a way of dealing with this, and then make decisions and restructure and all that. So that's why I was particularly interested when I heard it was about emotions today. It's just I can so much relate to it, and helps me to often like understand a bit like how it works, how the emotions work, how we can use them, and not see them as something scary, but actually like Gail said, like invite them actually in and sit with them. I know it sounds very, very strange, but I get it. We should almost like see them as a friend, because they're there anyway. They're not going anywhere. We can't live without them. We need to sort of like learn to embrace them, and make the best of it, and yeah, become friends with them. And it's a learning curve, and it's probably a long learning curve, but at the end of the day, I think it will help us like personally, but also professionally, you know, to handle situations, and sometimes just like take a step back and allow them to be relevant and important, and say everything else can actually wait, but my emotional state of mind is important, and I need to acknowledge it and respect it too. So yes, I'm in the middle of all this, so it was very interesting.
No, that's awesome, and thank you for sharing that. You know, I think most of us are hardest on ourselves. We don't give ourselves a break. It's always us. I mean, I know for myself, I'm never good enough. No matter what I've done is never good enough. And why is this happening? And you know, we keep going down these routes, which you're doing at the moment. And we're unforgiving to ourselves, but we'll forgive everybody else for doing things wrong or making mistakes or being under stress. We've got to give ourselves a break sometime. And I think when you learn that, you actually realize, okay, hold on, I need time out. I need to just go and have a coffee. Because once you've just relaxed, you'll be able to go and do things 10 times better. But everything's just too much in your head. So I think today's been really awesome, Gail. Thank you for that. And Gisela, do you resonate with what I've just said?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I think sometimes when we're like in the business world, we're very hard on ourselves, and we see ourselves like the way that people, our customers, maybe see us. We're just a provider of services or something, but we are also human, right? And my goal is actually to train my customers to respect me enough so that they see me as a human as well. So I started sharing like personal things with my customers. Like I'm saying, I'm actually on a road trip with my daughter at the moment, just so that they almost like learn to understand there are some boundaries, you know. Then they stop sending me messages in the middle of the night about like non-important things, just to just have like a relationship that is from human to human, and not from service provider to somebody who pays you, right?
Yeah, because I think that it goes into that space of being objectified, and we don't want to be objectified. So it's wonderful that you're taking that strategy, and I think it's such a great reminder that you know, to acknowledge and express for ourselves, hey, I am human, and to foster those kinds of relationships. So that's really you know, that's really amazing. And I really want to just encourage you, and your feedback's so amazing, because when people listen to this, it's so great just to hear your story and what you're going through, because like we learn and grow from each other. You know, when in that time of like getting super overwhelmed, just stop, pause, like step away from like your desk or from your computer, you know, even just go and have a cup of tea and just sort of breathe into that feeling of anxiety, and just ask it the question, okay, you know, overwhelmment or anxiety, what message are you giving me? It more than likely is going, there's too much coming at us, we're not going to be able to get everything done, And if we don't get everything done, then you're going to disappoint people. And when you disappoint people, you're not going to get paid. And if we don't get paid, we don't pay the bills, we're going to die. It's
Yes.
you know what I mean? But that's firing off like so fast because you're not hearing it. You're just feeling those feelings. So we've almost just like got to give that feeling like space and say, communicate with me, talk to me, tell me what's going on for you. And then in that space, while you're sipping your coffee or your cup of tea, you can go, you know what, hey, we've got this. We just do one task at a time, one moment at a time, or whatever it is that your self-talk will be. And we just calm that emotion down and it goes, okay, I've been heard, I've been seen, I've been understood. And then it kind of dissipates. And then you'll see that you're going to the clearing and you kind of won't have that feeling of it all coming in at you all at once. And if it means at first you got to kind of do that, several times a day, as you do it more and more and more and more, you'll be able to do it a lot quicker, even while you're working. Overwhelming comes and you can almost like do it quick, without needing to create space for it, like going to have a cup of tea and having a little chat with it.
Yes, but that's why also just listening now to you ladies, that already gives me like a break, because you obviously you're taking it to another level, looking at things from more with a different perspective and as an outsider. So that alone is so calming for me. So it's amazing. So I also, theoretically now I wouldn't have time to take out this 1.5 hours out of my day, but I forced myself and I said, no, this is exactly what I need to do. I need to give myself this break, and because it will help me, in the long run. And it's having this bi-weekly meetings. It's just a little reminder. Hey, it's just something. Just look at yourself from outside. What are you doing? How are you working? How are you feeling? And so, yeah, it's very, very good. Thank you.
Inside out approach. Gisela, I'm so happy. I mean, I put a little note on here. I don't know if anybody saw it, but mindset is everything. And one of the things you said there was boundaries. And I think we personally battle with those boundaries. And if you don't set those boundaries within yourself and you don't tell people those boundaries, they will overstep them all the time. And like you say, clients will phone you in the middle of the night. But why do they phone you? Because you'll answer and you'll deal with it. Whereas if you've got those boundaries and you actually switch it off and you say, right, between 10 o'clock and 6 in the morning, I am not taking calls. And most offices are not open during that time. And you make that your rule. Don't then, when something goes on, do something. Well done. Yeah. So it's really awesome. And thank you very much for today. I think it's been great. Our next session is the 1st of March. So that's going to be exciting. And 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. It kicks off at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.